Good day, everyone. Today, we will embark on a deep and comprehensive exploration of the spiritual self, a dimension of human existence that connects our inner life to the transcendent, the sacred, and the meaning of our existence. In the course Understanding the Self, the spiritual self plays a vital role in completing our grasp of human identity, alongside the physical, social, cultural, and psychological selves. Our task today is not merely to understand spirituality and religion from a textbook perspective, but to critically examine their roles, benefits, dangers, and philosophical implications in both personal life and society.
Let us begin by clarifying two often conflated but distinct terms: religion and spirituality. Although they are interrelated, their emphases and modes of expression are different, and understanding these differences is crucial to any meaningful discussion of faith, meaning, and human experience. Religion can be defined as a structured system of beliefs, practices, rituals, and moral codes centered on the sacred or divine. It is typically expressed through institutions such as churches, mosques, temples, or synagogues, which provide not only spaces for communal worship, but also organizational frameworks for transmitting doctrines, regulating rituals, and preserving traditions across generations. Religion offers its adherents shared narratives about the nature of existence, guidelines for ethical behavior, and established rituals that provide structure and continuity in life. It often emphasizes orthodoxy, correct belief, and orthopraxy, correct practice, shaping both individual conduct and communal identity. Religion, therefore, fulfills social, cultural, and moral functions. It gives people a sense of belonging to a larger community, creates moral order, and provides ceremonies marking life transitions such as birth, marriage, and death. Spirituality, by contrast, refers to a broader and often more personal quest for meaning, purpose, and connection with something greater than oneself. While spirituality may be linked to traditional religions, it is not confined to them. For many, spirituality involves a personal relationship with God or a higher power, but it can also manifest as a deep sense of harmony with nature, compassion for humanity, or awareness of the interconnectedness of the universe. Spirituality is often described as inward, personal, and experiential. It focuses less on institutional rules and external rituals, and more on individual transformation, inner peace, and authenticity of life. Practices such as meditation, reflection, mindfulness, and personal prayer are common expressions of spirituality, which aims to cultivate meaning, resilience, and a sense of transcendence in everyday existence. Theologian Sandra Schneider's 2003 makes a helpful distinction by noting that religion is primarily about belonging, doctrines, and traditions, while spirituality is about lived experience and personal transformation. Religion organizes faith into systems, while spirituality seeks to interiorize and personalize it. Thus, one may be spiritual without being religious, such as someone who does not adhere to a formal church, but practices meditation, compassion, and mindfulness. Conversely, one may be religious without being deeply spiritual, faithfully attending worship services and following rituals, but without profound personal engagement with the transcendent. Of course, many people are both religious and spiritual, experiencing faith as both a communal belonging and a deeply personal journey. Religion provides structure, continuity, and community, while spirituality emphasizes authentic experience, personal meaning, and transcendence. The two often overlap and can enrich one another. Religion grounds spirituality in tradition, while spirituality keeps religion alive, dynamic, and personally relevant. Recognizing the distinction between them allows us to appreciate the many ways humans seek and express the sacred in their lives. The importance of spirituality in human life. Spirituality provides a framework for individuals to make sense of life's deepest and most unsettling questions. Why are we here? What is our purpose? How do we confront suffering and death? These questions are universal, transcending culture, religion, and historical period. Psychologists and philosophers alike recognize that spirituality often functions as a compass, guiding values, shaping behavior, and helping people endure moments of uncertainty and pain. Viktor Frankl, 1946, highlighted that the human search for meaning is not merely a luxury, but a core psychological drive, as vital to our survival as food and shelter. An illustration. Think of spirituality as a lens. Without it, life may appear fragmented, like a blurry photo. But when individuals adopt a spiritual perspective, the fragments can be integrated into a coherent picture, one that allows suffering, joy, hope, and even mortality to be seen as parts of a meaningful whole. Theories and concepts. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, introduced logotherapy, the therapy of meaning. In his influential book Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl argued that human beings are driven primarily by the will to meaning, the innate need to find purpose in life. This stands in contrast to Freud's belief in the will to pleasure and Adler's will to power. Key idea: even in the most inhumane conditions, such as concentration camps, Frankl observed that those who could frame their suffering within a meaningful narrative, e.g., love for family, commitment to a higher cause, faith in God, were more likely to survive psychologically. Illustration: imagine two patients facing cancer. One interprets the illness as meaningless misfortune. The other sees it as an opportunity to cherish relationships and deepen their faith. Both suffer, but the latter is more likely to endure with resilience. Harold Koenig, 2012, Spirituality and Health. Harold Koenig, a leading researcher in the field of religion and health, has produced extensive evidence that spirituality and religiosity are correlated with better physical and mental health outcomes. Key findings: spiritual practices such as prayer, meditation, or communal worship can reduce stress, improve immune function, and strengthen social support networks. These benefits, in turn, enhance resilience and recovery. Illustration: Koenig's findings can be visualized through the analogy of a protective umbrella. Spirituality shelters individuals from life storms by reducing stress hormones, fostering supportive relationships, and promoting healthier lifestyle choices, e.g., lower rates of substance abuse. Kenneth Pargament, 1997, Religious and Spiritual Coping. Kenneth Pargament focused on how people use spirituality to cope with crises and trauma. He distinguished between two main types of religious coping. Positive religious coping, seeking comfort through prayer, community, rituals, and viewing hardships as opportunities for growth. This is associated with improved psychological adjustment, resilience, and even physical health. Negative religious coping, interpreting suffering as divine punishment, abandonment, or a curse. This often leads to greater distress, depression, and hopelessness. Illustration: after a natural disaster, one person may find peace by joining their faith community to rebuild homes, while another might withdraw in despair, feeling punished by God. The coping style shapes not only mental health, but also community recovery. Smith, McCullough, and Pohl, 2003, Spirituality and Longevity. This landmark meta-analysis examined the relationship between religious involvement and physical health, revealing that people who engage in spiritual practices tend to live longer lives. Key mechanisms: social integration. Religious groups provide networks of care, belonging, and accountability. Healthier lifestyles. Many faith traditions discourage harmful behaviors, excessive drinking, smoking, risky sex. Psychological well-being. Hope, forgiveness, gratitude, and optimism fostered through spirituality buffer against depression and anxiety. Illustration: spirituality here can be compared to a garden ecosystem, not only nourishing the soul, but creating conditions, support, discipline, mindset that sustain physical life as well. Broader implications. These frameworks collectively demonstrate that spirituality is not merely an abstract or mystical domain. It is existential, helping people wrestle with meaning, purpose, and mortality. Psychological, promoting coping strategies, resilience, and emotional regulation. Physiological, influencing stress hormones, immunity. And longevity.social, building communities of care, moral guidance, and solidarity. Spirituality contributes to human flourishing in ways that cross disciplinary boundaries. It is as relevant in clinical psychology and medicine as it is in philosophy and theology. The dangers of extremist religious views. While religion and spirituality can provide meaning, community, and moral guidance, they can also become dangerous when distorted into extremism or used as tools of control. Religious extremism emerges when belief becomes rigid, intolerant, and hostile to diversity of thought. Instead of inspiring compassion and wisdom, it often fosters dogmatism, suppresses inquiry, denies scientific progress, and legitimizes abuse. Historical examples of religion holding back science and culture. Al-Ghazali, 11th century, his influential work, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, argued against rationalist philosophy in the Islamic world, especially the teachings of thinkers like Avicenna and Al-Farabi. This intellectual turn discouraged critical inquiry into natural science and philosophy, redirecting energies toward theological orthodoxy. Many historians argue this contributed to the decline of scientific innovation in the Middle East at a time when Europe was beginning its Renaissance. The Catholic Church and Galileo Galilei. 17th century Galileo's defense of heliocentrism, proving that the Earth revolved around the Sun, was met with fierce resistance from the Catholic Church, which viewed it as heretical. Galileo was forced to recant under threat of punishment and lived under house arrest. His trial symbolizes how rigid religious authority can obstruct the pursuit of truth and scientific discovery. Big Bang and evolution. Theories that revolutionized science were initially rejected or condemned by religious authorities who interpreted them as threats to Scripture. Darwin's theory of evolution, for example, was widely opposed because it challenged literal interpretations of creation. Similarly, early cosmological theories like the Big Bang were resisted for contradicting entrenched dogmas, though both were eventually accepted by mainstream religious institutions. Modern tragedies of religious extremism. The Jonestown Massacre, 1978 in Guyana. Jim Jones, leader of the People's Temple, orchestrated the mass suicide of more than 900 followers, including children, by poisoning. This event is one of the most chilling examples of how blind devotion to a charismatic religious leader can lead to catastrophic loss of life. The Waco Siege, 1993. David Koresh, leader of the Branch Davidians in Texas, claimed prophetic authority and stockpiled weapons. A standoff with federal agents ended in a deadly fire, killing more than 70 people, including children. This tragedy highlights the danger of authoritarian religious control combined with apocalyptic belief systems. Apollo Quiboloy, contemporary Philippines founder of the Kingdom of Jesus Christ, KHC. Quiboloy is a self-proclaimed, appointed Son of God who exercises immense religious, political, and financial influence. Beyond doctrinal controversies, Quiboloy faces serious allegations of sexual abuse, human trafficking, and exploitation of women and minors. In 2021, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, indicted him for sex trafficking and coercing young women into sexual relations under the guise of religious authority. In the Philippines, multiple testimonies and cases have accused him of abusing his followers while hiding behind the veil of divine authority. His case demonstrates how religious leaders, when unchecked, can use spiritual power to manipulate, exploit, and victimize vulnerable individuals. The larger pattern. Across history and into the present, these examples reveal a recurring danger. When religious authority is placed beyond question, it can become a force of oppression rather than liberation. It can silence scientific inquiry, stifle cultural development, and enable grave abuses of human rights. Spirituality and religion can indeed be forces for good, but only when tempered by humility, accountability, openness to knowledge, and respect for human dignity. Cults, definition, and allure. A cult is generally defined as a group characterized by extreme devotion to a leader, doctrine, or ideology, often requiring unquestioning obedience and discouraging critical thinking. Unlike mainstream religions or social movements, cults typically impose rigid hierarchies and strict control over members' beliefs and behaviors. They appeal to universal psychological needs such as belonging, certainty, and meaning, but often exploit these very needs to manipulate individuals. Research findings and theoretical perspectives. Sociologist Jan Jelalik, 2004, identified several defining features of cults. Authoritarian leadership. A single charismatic leader or small elite exercises unchecked authority, presenting themselves as divinely chosen, uniquely enlightened, or infallible. Exclusivism and absolute truth claims. Cults insist they alone possess the true path to salvation, enlightenment, or purpose, delegitimizing all outside beliefs. Isolation from mainstream society. Members are often encouraged or pressured to cut ties with family, friends, and other influences that might challenge the group's teachings. Exploitative control. Leaders regulate members' finances, relationships, work, and even personal decisions such as marriage, child rearing, and healthcare. Psychological manipulation and fear-based obedience. Cults use indoctrination, repetitive rituals, guilt, and fear of punishment or damnation to suppress dissent and ensure compliance. Psychological mechanisms. Social psychologists have studied why people join and remain in cults. Need for belonging. Many recruits are individuals who feel socially alienated, marginalized, or disillusioned. Cults provide instant community and identity. Desire for certainty. In times of political, social, or personal instability, cults offer black and white answers to life's complex problems. Obedience to authority. Experiments by Milgram and later work in social psychology show how easily people comply with authoritative figures, even against their moral intuitions. Cognitive dissonance. Once committed, members justify their sacrifices, time, money, autonomy, by doubling down on loyalty making. It's psychologically difficult to leave. The allure of cults. The promise of certainty, community, and salvation in uncertain times is what draws individuals to cults. For example, in the 1970s, Jim Jones People's Temple promised racial equality, communal living, and utopia, but ended in mass suicide at Jonestown. In the 1990s. Heaven's Gate offered spiritual transcendence through extraterrestrial salvation, but coerced mass suicide. More recently, allegations against groups like NXIVM and religious leaders, such as Apollo Quibeloy in the Philippines, highlight how cultic structures often conceal sexual exploitation, financial abuse, and human rights violations. Broader implications. Cults not only harm individual members, but also threaten families, communities, and society. Their manipulation can erode democratic values, suppress critical inquiry, and lead to systemic abuse masked under the guise of spiritual or ideological devotion. In essence, cults thrive by offering meaning but delivering control, promising salvation but creating dependency. Recognizing their features and mechanisms is crucial for prevention, education, and recovery. The allure of atheism and the Epicurean paradox. In contrast to religion and spirituality, atheism is generally defined as the absence of belief in a deity or divine beings. It does not necessarily assert that no gods exist. Rather, it is a rejection of theistic claims due to lack of evidence. For many, atheism is appealing because it frees individuals from institutional dogma and emphasizes human reason, empirical science, and ethics grounded in human responsibility rather than divine authority. This allows moral systems to emerge from human well-being, justice, and rational deliberation, rather than from scripture or tradition. The Epicurean paradox and the problem of evil. One of the most enduring philosophical challenges to theism is the Epicurean paradox, attributed to the Greek philosopher Epicurus, 341 to 270 BC. It poses a profound question about the nature of God in the face of evil and suffering. If God is willing to prevent evil but not able, then he is not all-powerful. If God is able but not willing, then he is not benevolent. If God is both willing and able, then why does evil exist? This paradox strikes at the core of the problem of evil, which remains one of the strongest philosophical arguments against traditional theism. Theists have responded in several ways. Free will defense. Thinkers like Augustine argue that evil exists because God gave humans free will, and moral freedom entails the possibility of misuse. Soul-making theodicy. John Hick suggested suffering is a necessary part of human development, enabling virtues like courage and compassion. Mystery or divine plan. Others hold that human beings cannot fully comprehend God's purposes, and suffering might have meaning beyond human understanding. Despite these responses, the paradox continues to resonate with skeptics and believers alike, highlighting the tension between divine attributes and lived human realities. Varieties of atheism. Atheism is not a monolithic worldview. Philosophers and scholars identify different forms. Strong, positive, atheism. The conviction that no gods exist. Weak, negative, atheism. Simply the lack of belief without making a definitive claim. Agnostic atheism recognizes that while knowledge of gods may be impossible, disbelief remains the rational stance. Practical atheism, living as though gods do not exist, regardless of theoretical belief. This diversity shows that atheism is not just about denial, but about different ways of engaging with existence outside of theistic frameworks. Atheism and ethics. A common critique of atheism is that without God, morality collapses. Yet many atheists argue the opposite, that morality becomes more authentic when rooted in human empathy, social contracts, and reason rather than divine command. Secular humanism, for instance, emphasizes dignity, equality, and flourishing as guiding principles. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus explored how meaning and responsibility emerge precisely because there is no divine overseer, challenging humanity to create values in an indifferent universe. Spiritual atheism and secular spirituality. Importantly, atheism does not exclude spirituality. While some atheists reject anything associated with spirituality as superstition, others embrace non-theistic practices that cultivate awe, transcendence, and inner peace. Examples include secular Buddhism, which emphasizes mindfulness, compassion, and liberation from suffering without belief in gods or metaphysics. Spiritual naturalism, which finds wonder in the cosmos, the laws of nature, and human creativity, treating existence itself as sacred without invoking the supernatural. Humanist rituals, such as ceremonies for birth, marriage, and death, that provide community and meaning without religious doctrine. In this way, atheism does not necessarily lead to nihilism. Instead, it can encourage a positive spirituality grounded in human experience, reason, and the natural world. Illustrations and contemporary relevance. In popular culture, works like Carl Sagan's Cosmos or Richard Dawkins' The Magic of Reality inspire awe at the universe through science rather than scripture. Figures like Stephen Hawking embodied the spirit of intellectual curiosity without invoking divine explanations. At the same time, movements such as the Sunday Assembly, sometimes called Atheist Church, show that even without religion, people still seek community, meaning, and shared values. The separation of church and state, the Philippine context. In the Philippines, the 1987 Constitution firmly enshrines the principle of separation of church and state. Article 2, Section 6 explicitly declares, "The separation of church and state shall be inviolable." This provision reflects the framers' intent to maintain a balance between respecting religious freedom and ensuring that governance remains secular, impartial, and independent of religious dictates. It also echoes a long history in Philippine society where religion, particularly Catholicism, has played a dominant role in politics, education, and culture. Case illustrations and jurisprudence. Estrada versus Escritor, 2003. This landmark case involved a Jehovah's Witness court interpreter who cohabited with a man not legally her husband. Ordinarily, this would constitute a ground for administrative sanction under civil service rules. However, the Supreme Court, invoking the Free Exercise Clause, recognized her religious freedom to live according to her faith's doctrines, exempting her from charges of immorality. This case demonstrated the judiciary's willingness to weigh individual religious practices against state laws, tilting toward accommodation of sincere religious beliefs. The Reproductive Health (RH) Law 2012, the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act, faced fierce opposition from the Catholic Church, which argued that it violated religious and moral teachings. Despite widespread protests, the Supreme Court upheld the law in 2014, Embark versus Ochoa, affirming the state's authority to craft public health policies based on secular reasoning, while carving out exemptions for religious institutions and individuals on matters of conscience. This case highlighted the court's attempt to strike a middle ground, upholding secular governance while respecting individual religious objections. Iglesia ni Cristo versus Court of Appeals, 1996. This case tested the limits of press freedom when a broadcast critical of Iglesia ni Cristo was challenged. The court ruled in favor of protecting the religious group's right against defamation while still balancing constitutional freedoms. It reflected the tension between protecting religious sensitivities and upholding the secular freedoms of speech and the press. Taxation of religious institutions. While the Constitution provides tax exemptions for religious property used, actually, directly, and exclusively for religious purposes, Article 6, Section 28(3), disputes arise when properties are used for commercial gain. These controversies emphasize that while religion is respected, it cannot be used as a shield for purely economic activities. The controversy over the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act of 2012, decided in Embark versus Ochoa, 2014, further illustrates these limits. The Catholic Church and its allies argued that the law violated religious freedom by promoting contraceptives. While the Supreme Court granted conscience exemptions for individual health workers and institutions, it ultimately upheld the law as a valid expression of the state's secular authority to protect public health. This decision reaffirmed that governance must remain grounded in secular principles, even when religious institutions strongly object. A related case is Diocese of Bacolod v. Comelec, 2015, which arose when the diocese displayed large tarpaulins labeling candidates as Team Patay or Team Buhay based on their stance on the RH law. The Commission on Elections, Comelec, ordered their removal, citing election rules. Although the Supreme Court later struck down Comelec's censorship, it emphasized that churches, while free to express moral opinions, cannot overstep into partisan political campaigning. The ruling reinforced the constitutional prohibition against religious groups exercising political control. Broader implications. These cases illustrate the dynamic negotiation between religious freedom and secular governance in the Philippines. On one hand, the Constitution protects the free exercise of religion and recognizes its importance in Filipino identity. On the other hand, the state must remain neutral, ensuring that public policy is not dictated by any particular faith. The Catholic Church, with its historical influence, continues to shape debates on issues like divorce, same-sex marriage, and reproductive rights, showing how separation is not always clean-cut in practice. The Philippine experience demonstrates that separation of church and state does not mean hostility toward religion, but rather the careful balancing of religious liberty with the demands of a pluralistic, democratic society. The ongoing challenge is to ensure that while religious beliefs are respected, public policy remains inclusive, secular, and responsive to the needs of all citizens regardless of faith. Healthy spirituality and respect for beliefs. True spirituality is characterized by openness, humility, and respect. A healthy spirituality does not impose itself on others, but nurtures dialogue, understanding, and peace. Unlike rigid dogmatism that seeks conformity, Authentic spirituality embraces the complexity of human experience and recognizes that meaning can be sought in diverse ways. It acknowledges the coexistence of religious, spiritual, agnostic, and atheistic perspectives, seeking harmony rather than division. Core elements of healthy spirituality.
Pluralism, respecting multiple paths to meaning. True spirituality recognizes that people find purpose and transcendence through different traditions, be it Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, indigenous practices, or secular humanism. Rather than claiming superiority, it values diversity as a reflection of humanity's search for truth. This pluralism is not mere tolerance but an active appreciation of varied worldviews. Philosophers like John Hick proposed the pluralist hypothesis, suggesting that all major religions are culturally conditioned responses to the same ultimate reality: dialogue, engaging across differences without hostility. Dialogue is the practice of meeting the other with openness rather than suspicion. This requires active listening, a willingness to learn, and a commitment to understanding. Dialogue is not about conversion but about building trust. In interfaith contexts, such as the Parliament of the World's Religions or local initiatives in Mindanao, dialogue has been a key tool in reducing prejudice and fostering reconciliation between groups historically in conflict. Humility. Recognizing no single tradition has a monopoly on truth, humility protects spirituality from arrogance and exclusivism. While faith traditions may hold their own convictions as sacred, humility acknowledges that human understanding is limited. This echoes the philosophical stance of fallibilism, the idea that no human belief is beyond revision. Humility allows people to hold firm to their beliefs while still respecting others. It bridges certainty with openness, compassion, prioritizing kindness and service over dogma. Spirituality becomes meaningful when it translates into ethical action. Compassion is the lived expression of spirituality, helping the poor, protecting the environment, advocating for justice, and healing divisions. Across traditions, compassion is central. The Christian concept of agape, selfless love, the Buddhist value of karu, and the Islamic principle of rahma, mercy. A spirituality without compassion risks becoming empty ritual or mere ideology.
In the Philippines, interfaith peace-building initiatives in Mindanao serve as a living example of healthy spirituality in action. Programs that bring together Christians, Muslims, and indigenous peoples, LUMAD, emphasize shared values such as respect for life, community solidarity, and justice. These efforts demonstrate how openness and dialogue can prevent cycles of violence and build sustainable peace. Globally, the Interfaith Youth Corps in the United States has shown how pluralism can flourish among students of different backgrounds, creating service projects that unite rather than divide. In both cases, spirituality becomes less about doctrinal supremacy and more about fostering human dignity. Healthy spirituality is not about enforcing uniformity, but about cultivating a mindset that values connection, growth, and peace. It is characterized by pluralism, dialogue, humility, and compassion, all of which empower individuals and communities to transcend division. At its best, spirituality is not a wall that separates, but a bridge that unites, reminding us of our shared humanity. Conclusion: the value of the spiritual self. In conclusion, the spiritual self is a vital dimension of human life. Whether expressed through religion, personal spirituality, or even through secular quests for meaning, it shapes our values, provides resilience in suffering, and inspires us to live with compassion and integrity. At its best, spirituality uplifts individuals and communities. At its worst, when distorted into extremism, it can destroy lives and cultures. As future professionals, citizens, and leaders, you are challenged not only to understand the spiritual self intellectually, but also to cultivate it wisely. A healthy spiritual self is one that respects diversity, seeks truth, nurtures compassion, and contributes to both personal well-being and social progress.